So we're going to be talking about the apprehension and court process. So kind of what happens, okay? So like I stated, whenever a child is removed from the care of their parents, the parents and the CAS have to be in front of a judge within 5 days. You go to family court, okay? And once at family court, that's where the protection application, so the society's applying to the courts for the application to state, this is why we believe the child is not safe in the care of the parents, and this is what our plan is at this time. From there, there's the court papers, and then there's something that could be looked at as temporary care and custody. It's a temporary care and custody motion, so it's what gets the ball rolling for the idea of the apprehension and how long the child stays. There's conferences, there's going to be meetings. Hopefully the families maybe come to the table at a family group conference, which is where a family member and the society gather around at a table with hopefully as many family members as possible on that family member's part, and they start to brainstorm, what are we going to do to get this child out of care or get this child safe? That's where the idea of kinship comes into play, because if you've got a grandma, aunt, uncle, adult cousin, coach of the soccer team, community counselor, someone who says, I can be a safe space for this child, you have them at the table, this is where the work can be done to get the child out of care sooner than later, okay? From there, we're going to hope kids are going home. If they're not going home, nobody can reach an agreement. Files can go to trial, but trial is like towards the very, very end, and it's for the very, very extreme cases where service goals are not being met, and it's the another chance, another chance, another chance, and nothing is happening, no movements is happening, because this kid can't continue to just sit in care and have visits and have this or that and a worker here and a worker there. Like, a plan needs to be made around this child. That child's time in care is very precious. And then there's something called what you would call a status review, which happens at like 6-month intervals of, okay, status, what's going on right now? Okay, so this has been checked off, this goal, this goal, this goal's been met, great. I want to see you back here in so time, give me an idea of what's going on, okay? So it's truly about the court process, okay? I mentioned that we can't just have kids sitting in care while goals are not being met. There's the issue of permanency. So you remember that population I mentioned that's probably between their early mid-20s now that grew up in care? And the society saw that, you know what, we didn't do such a great job. It was not a good job. Well, there was something that came into play, which was called the idea of permanency planning. And that if a child is under the age of 6, they have 1 year in care. And a permanency plan needs to be looked at, which means at the 6-month mark, the word permanency is floating around very, very hard, because they've only got 6 more months to figure out what to do with this child. If they're over the age of 6, it's 2 years. The reason being around child development and the issues of the ability to form attachment. So under 6 is 1 year, over 6 is 2. So for anybody working with families or who have they've worked with the Children's Aid Society, you may hear the idea of the clock. This is what they're referring to. Do they have 2 years or 1 year? And we want to be able to get children out of care and get them with family, community members, somebody, instead of them sitting in care, okay? If they are infants and service plans are not being met at that 6-month mark, the word of permanency and adoption starts getting thrown around. So although a year seems like a long time, a year is not a long time. Not at all. Especially if you're under the age of 6. Does anybody have any questions about that? Or is that pretty clear?
What are the chances that you would be able to get your child back if the child indeed wanted to come back to the home? I guess it all depends on the severity of the case.
So it depends on the severity of the case. If there's a history attached to this family, how the narrative of that history is it a positive, somewhat positive, or is it completely negative? You're going to want, what else is looked at is how quickly a family is able to mobilize themselves, get in touch with community services, start to check off whatever is written in the service plan to decrease or eliminate whatever this child protection concern was and increase the safety that the child would have with their parent. All right, so if we look at something like, say, substance abuse issues, you've really got to be like an individual's really got to be supported and really focused on getting through their substance abuse, because when it comes to substance abuse, you've got to show a time of sobriety and that you've maintained or created a pattern of behavior of being able to attend and use the supports you have at your reach to be able to show that that time frame of that the child is safe and that this is no longer something you're doing in your life. Now, there's always the possibility of relapse, but what's in place for you? And you need to give that narrative. There needs to be time to write the narrative that Mrs. So-and-so has been so many months sober, continues to attend NA, AA, whatever those supports look like, attend her treatment programming, has started volunteering or anything like that, right? Because that's going to show, for one, that you're using what's at your grasp. It's going to show that you're able to start making some behavioral changes, and it's going to show that you're in a better position to take care of your child. But you might only have really and truly 6 months to get that groundwork started, because then you have to, once you've got the groundwork kind of laid, like if you think about like making a road, you've got 6 months to kind of lay your foundation, and then you got to start putting those bricks in place, and you've got to make that trail long enough that the society can be like, you know what, we can get to the end point, so that kid could go home. Versus no bricks have been laid down. There's no path for us to walk on. We can't send a child home with no path to go down. So that's how it ends up. That's how that 1 year can really go by really quickly. And that's why the idea of kinship then comes into play, because a year to kind of get sober or move through your addictions and have the supports in place and be sober, I'm going to say that's not exactly the easiest thing to do. So having your supports in place, having family who can maybe care for your child, because if your child is not in the care of Children's Aid but they're in kinship, there's no clock. So we don't have a 1 year mark, we don't have a 2 year mark. But guess what? Your kids with family, all of their cultural, religious needs, their heritage, it all falls into place. Mom, dad may have more access to the child. There's more community pieces to be involved. And this child is going to know who and where they come from. Right? And that's why kinship is such a big part of the work. Okay? And as I just spoke, kinship, pages 18 and 19 in your book. So kin is sorry. Yes. There's no way a child's adopted without their knowledge. It may be they didn't know the child was being put up for adoption until they get to the court papers. But yeah, a child is not adopted without a parent's knowledge.
Well, assume that the parent, the knowledge has to do with not knowing the parent whose child has been adopted. She doesn't know where the child is. And even if she has been told after the fact, or she was not told initially, I am not sure exactly what it was, but she's trying to find her child and she doesn't know even where apparently the child is.
So if the child has been adopted, and now keeping in mind, I'm not an adoption expert, but once a child is adopted, that's their new family. There is open adoption agreements, but that's very different from what you're talking about. Okay, so if they're adopted out, and there is no. Again, I'm not 100% sure on this, but from my understanding, there is no recourse. You can't be told where your child lives. Like that's.
You have to wait until the child is old enough to request information.
Yes. Yes. So when a child reaches a particular age, which I believe is like 18, 16. If anybody in the room knows, please share, because I'm not up on all the adoption rules and laws. The child can request to have the information, but the parent can't go out and look for their child who's been adopted.
And they both have to request it, the birth parent.
Yes, yes. Now, if it's an open adoption, that can be stipulated where it means the biological parent has maybe a couple amount of visits every year, or they get pictures and progress kind of notes on how this child's been doing over time. But that's if it's open. Okay. So page 18 and 19 in your booklets, and page 20, speak to kin kith. So kin is family members, kith would be community and supporting members around this child. So again, it could be the basketball coach, it could be an elder in the community, it could be the pastor, any of those type of people who can be seen as positive supports around the child or who know the family. They could also be looked at to be assessed. Having your family support. So one thing within the African Canadian community is we don't share. What happens in my house stays in my house. Or what's going on over there stays over there. We don't need to be involved in that. We have enough things on our plate as it is. So if I don't know that, I already stated I have a sister with a nephew. He's school age. He's got 5 adults around him that can attend to all of his needs. If my sister and her husband decide to block out 3 of those adults, one being me and the other 2 being his grandparents, there goes his family support, right? And 2 working parents in this society, you need support. 6 o'clock at daycare is a real thing. You've got to pick somebody up, right? Those things are important. So if you don't have that family support, now you may have issues with daycare. You might have issues, who's watching your kid on a PA day? Or if your kid's sick and both of you have had to go to work and you only have a limited amount of sick days. And those are just some ideas. Now be involved with child welfare and not have your family support. Who's gonna help to, and I'll say like metaphorically, pick you up when all of this is coming down on you and it's so hard for you to compute and understand and get through? Who's listening when you've tuned out because it's so traumatic and you're being re-traumatized again because this is your 3rd time involved with child welfare? Having that support is so important. And I spoke about the idea of the family group conferencing. Bring the people to the table with you. So if that means you working with Mrs. Smith, and Mrs. Smith has a sister, and maybe her and the sister don't get along, but Mrs. Smith says, you know what, you reach out to my sister, speak to her. Great, and maybe now the sister's gonna come to the table. She may not still be impressed with Mrs. Smith, but Auntie Smith, she wants to be there for that child. Therefore, she'll put whatever is going on between sisters aside, or brother and sister aside, to be there for that kid. Because at the end of the day, no child ever has to be born, so they all have the right and they all deserve the chance to have the best life possible. So they're there at the table for that child. And some of the things they may hear may be hard, but they may also have some solutions. All right? And even something as simple as attending for court. If you're connected with the community-based, or if you guys as community-based agencies are connected with these families and they have court, even attending court, you may not understand the child welfare process yourself, but attending, being someone that they can, squeeze your hand because this is hard to hear, or just being someone they can look at so they don't end up blowing up on the worker and start yelling at everybody, or they don't fall to the ground in tears, right? The nonverbal support can be just as important as the verbal support that's given. Just showing up and holding a hand, or writing down the phone numbers, or writing down some of those key phrases, that can be just as important as everything as the professionals you guys are can be saying to these families. So how do you find support? So there's the One Vision, One Voice website, which is housed at the Ontario Association of Children's Aid Society's website. There's the Black Service Directory, which has social services. And part of what One Vision, One Voice is trying to do is ensure that as phase 2 of this project closes out, that services are up and live. We all know everything lives on the internet, right? Child welfare may be around for 99 years, but the internet's around forever, right? So being able to have the support services that are in place for families out in the community, having them up on Buy Blacks is another goal that we're trying to accomplish by the end of the phase 2 project. So that if that means typing in something, oh, the Smith family, you know what? They're gonna be moving to Caledon. What's up in Caledon that we can connect them to? Or what's close to Caledon that we can connect them to? Or they're moving into Simcoe. What's in Simcoe that we can connect them to? Being able to have something like that at the tip of your finger is power. Because for one, they're not alone. They have a direction on where to start, where they can get support. And it's showing them whatever paths are in place. There's legal aid, Ontario Legal Aid and Black Ontarians. There is calling your local CAS and asking to speak to their anti-oppression lead. the anti-racism lead or the anti-racism team, if they have one. It kind of all depends on what language the child welfare agency in your jurisdiction uses. Asking if they have a local advisory council or a council of the Black agencies that service the community, and see if there's someone there that you can speak with. Or then asking for the African Canadian affinity groups staff at a child welfare agency. Some agencies do have this, where they have groups of staff who've gotten together to try to have initiatives, promote education within the child welfare agency that they work at, to be able to hopefully increase knowledge of their coworkers, so that some of the anti-Black racism can start to decrease, and they start to ask the questions, they start to change their thinking, so that families are getting better service. The Black families are getting better service. African Canadians are getting better service, and their children are not sitting in care as long, and able to come home instead of sitting in care or being aged out. Okay? And again, also, what's the support? You guys. You guys are community-based agencies working across the province, working across Peel. That's where we are today, Peel, sorry. Checking with each other, networking with each other. Because at the end of the day, if phase 2 is the end of OVOV, where is the support going to lie for the African Canadian families? So who's going to be there for them? Because we'll all go back to our pieces. So that's why, again, it was so important to be able to deliver this training and hand over this knowledge to community-based agencies who can then help these families and help them navigate the child welfare system. Help them ask the questions they may have been too afraid to ask, to start to get different outcomes for themselves. Okay, this is the last time we're going to see this slide. Questions?
Just a question on that last point, or I guess with regards to the referrals and the community supports in place and programs and so forth. What is, in your opinion, I know we don't have anything, this is the closest to directly helping parents in the system that are struggling with this issue, but what other organization is out there, and I don't know if you can respond to this or anybody else has any knowledge of any other organization. I've heard of Beacon for the first time 5 minutes ago, but any other organization, or if that is the one, that gives as much support in this area as possible at this point.
Big Brothers Big Sisters received some funding. There was also African Canadian Services, United Achievers. We have a program specifically for Black families, and Marcia is the clinician. So she will actually go out with the families to assist them with any issues that they have. We also have a drop-in program that's specifically for Black families, where they can bring their kids in to have some playtime. And we're also planning workshops as we go along, specifically for Black families, to address any of their issues that they may have. So we've had one major workshop so far where we were able to get back some feedback from the community to find out what they need. But we're definitely here in Peel to support Black families in Mississauga, Brampton, and Caledon.
What's the name of your organization?
Malton Neighborhood Services. It's in Malton, yeah, but we travel.
It's an old organization, been around since 1975. So the name is not going to change, but they're all of Peel region, right? So, and it's quite well established. And it also does a multitude of programs. It's just incredible that it does. So this is just a tiny pocket of what it does, right? It's one of the few agencies that's actually is a part of the airport with children coming undocumented minors, and they operate a program at the airport. So they're quite wide, right? And the diversity is quite there, right? So.
But we certainly provide education, support, and advocacy. We have a chapter in Mississauga, and we also have one in Brampton. So those are some of the supports we could offer.
The organization I'm with is the Black Legal Action Center, and we will be open to the public shortly. And we represent and can represent and service all of Ontario as a specialty legal clinic. So we are not just only in Peel Region or in Toronto. We're actually on Lawrence Medina when our offices are open. So we can provide those services. And just as a lawyer, I would just mention, if you can mention to your clients, call us early. We can do a lot more advocacy if we are there at the beginning. A lot of times, often as a lawyer, I'm seeing clients very late in the game already going to court. If I can be with you when you are being questioned, before you're signing any agreements, I could do a lot better for you. So I would just mention that, and I will connect with everyone here. I took a few business cards, and I will be here at the end if people want to chat. So when we are open to the public, we can do a lot more representation legally as well. Yes, so so as a specialty legal clinic and as any legal clinic, there are 76 in Ontario, and we're all funded by Legal Aid Ontario. So as a clinic, we're separate in terms of our own governance. We have a board, we have an ED, but we are funded by Legal Aid Ontario. That's the only difference.
Do you guys have paid lawyers as well, or only?
I am a staff lawyer, there's 3 of us so far. Yes.
I mean, like, clients can, you guys also cater to legal aid clients as well, but you guys also cater to, clients that pay for services.
No, we would take no
Only-
payment.
Only legal aid clients.
So because we are a clinic, and there's a specialty clinic, it's depending on obviously your income level and your income threshold, but we do not take private retainers, no. We will help the community. Absolutely. Right. So when those doors are open, we definitely like to connect, because we can help in that way legally.
Do you know when your doors will open?
Very soon, likely by the end of the month,
All right.
Yeah, I just.
if all goes well. Just a few weeks.
Think on what she was saying with regards to her organization, and just as an actual initiative, that would actually, probably drop numbers significantly immediately. The minute that a parent is contacted, and they are an at-risk parent or family, period, they should be immediately, and not only them, I think all parents being contacted by CES should have this privilege, but immediately dealt with like a possible criminal, because they are. And I mean, what I mean by that, they shouldn't be treated like criminal. I'm not saying that this is the way, but I'm just saying this is really what's happening. So I feel like they should have immediately, you can talk to your lawyer. You have the right to remain silent. We are officials that have sometimes more power than police officers. We are almost like FBI agents. We'll investigate you from years and things that you never even remember. They have information on you they've been tallying up. All these things, and the fact of the matter with regards to the way their organization simply is not communicated at the beginning. They come in like lambs, like sheep, like helpful people here to help you and your family, and then immediately turn and change. And it happens so naturally and so seamlessly and so intelligently that the majority of us cannot catch, nor can we communicate when it's happening to us. And so I feel like them letting them come in, listen, you guys are suspects right now, and you don't have to say those words. I'm just giving, I'm taking my mom's hand. And there's an investigator started. Therefore, you need to go read about what you're getting into, so you're informed. You need to now maybe not wait for court, and now you're running around trying to figure out duty counsel and legal aid at the last second when everything's already going down. Because that's part of the strategy as well. Because by that time, it's too late to get legal representation. You're already in. So immediately when they come in, before they do all their casework and they build their case, and in a minute it starts, that's when they need to be able to say, listen, we are officially investigating you. This can be a criminal matter. Therefore, everything that you're saying can and will be used against you. This is what this is our interpretation. This is what we're saying is a problem. Give the parents a chance to explain. When they explain and give a good explanation, that should not automatically get dismissed like it automatically does a lot of times if it doesn't fit their perspective and their opinion. But that also now gets to get put up immediately against. If the parents saying no, nothing's wrong, kids saying nothing's wrong, and you, the investigator or intake worker is saying yes, my professional, sometimes not even social worker status of opinion, feel like there is something wrong. Next step, you're going down. Next step, supervisor. Next step, we need to now have a neutral ground or another meeting to determine if this is a valid case, specifically with the people who are at risk. Next level, there's always should be another level beyond what's currently the levels and the steps for people who are at risk. And so other measures like that I can continue to talk about, but I feel like the numbers would drop immediately if you give parents education on this situation immediately. Let them know that what their rights, these are another form of officers coming into your home, and you can end up with a criminal record. When a criminal record is called finding, apparently I learned all this stuff after. Parents, you can have a criminal record. So they have a finding on you, and all this fast-paced, back-to-back court in your house, and legal aid is doing their bare minimal, and you end up with a finding.
you can now have a parent record, a criminal record, where now, God forbid you want to work with children, or, there's a finding that you were a negligent parent. So you have now a criminal record as a parent now, and didn't have no real preliminary support or knowledge come support you before you got there. And so a lot of initial stuff at the beginning should be, I think, mandatory with regards to CAS, the intake worker, telling the family, okay, so we're here for this, but this is your rights. This is what you can do. This site over here gives you all the information you need to know about the preliminary process and what there's a 30-day mark. I didn't even know there's a 30-day mark. All of a sudden there was a paper in front of me. It's like, oh yeah, we were doing it for 30 days and then time's up and now you're in. I'm like, and then they gave me options, but it's interesting how it was a manipulatory situation, and that's another story. But yeah, so just like making sure that the parents have the rights and the privileges and the supports. I think that first meeting.
I think everything you said is really valid, and a lot of what you said is in the booklet, and that's why we wanted to share the information with you in one place, so that all of you can take that back to your agencies.
I'll send you electronic copies. If you need hard copies, we can send a few. But take that and share it with your family so they can read it and they have all of that information.
So that's a situation where knowledge become weaponized. And I remember once, and not blaming, but it was where the starting point came, where the officer came in and they asked a question, and then after the person answered the question, they said, well, you didn't have to answer that question, right? And it wasn't until the third time that it was done, then I asked the question, well, why didn't you tell them at the very beginning, right? So this whole aspect, which I know what child welfare does, and their mandate, but then the whole aspect of working within that lens of child welfare and integrity. So even a fact sheet for parents that simple breaks down it, because it can be difficult. And you can end up with a record, and you can end up with the fact that certain jobs you can't have access to, because you can't pass a vulnerable sector check, right? So all of these, there's significant ramification that can come down the line that you really don't know about until way after, and you're like, oh my God, how could this possibly be, right? So those pieces. So I understand that bit, and that people needs to be aware that there is really some serious pitfall that they can fall into, right? And then the other piece that, sometimes it's just the issue of privacy, right? We come from a place that they said, do not put your dirty laundry in front of people. Who's gonna tell anybody you're involved with CAS? Automatically, that's a judgment on you as a parent and all the above. So you are dealing with this monumental shame, as you see it, this monumental shame, this attack on your parenting, right? And then you're gonna have to turn around and open up this ugliness to somebody else. You're not gonna do it. But unfortunately, by not reaching out, you're burning up time, right? And I think that's what one thing parents don't understand, that really they do have some time with them, but after a while, time start running rapid and you're doing catch up, and you can never catch up on time, right?
The idea of a fact sheet for parents is really a very good one, so that every parent, I guess, can have access to whatever information, or even just phone numbers that you can call for different, not saying necessarily you guys have to provide that, but just so parents can be informed where to go when this happens and that happens.
Like, is there some help that maybe your group could give us or send to us to say, here's maybe a templated letter, here's where it's good to send it to, whether it be our school board, our politicians, or whatever, so that we could further advocate? Because if this ends March, then that's a lot of people who will unfortunately miss out. Because I think this was a really good session. I'm a parent and also a community person. I just don't know where to go.
Oh, you can want to Oh, she doesn't. Okay, I was going to direct the question to her, but she's not here. So right. I think, so we can put a templated letter together. I could do that. I think it's something we'll have to talk about and figure out where that goes. And I have to be honest in saying that with the March 31st deadline coming up, I don't know how
how effective it would be, but I think it would be actually not a bad idea to direct it to our association so that they know the value. Yeah, so that, I mean, it's likely that this project will continue in some form. So at least if they know that the community is getting value out of it, then they have that information and they can make decisions and determinations based on that. So we can definitely talk about it as a team, and then we have all your emails, so we'll put something together and reach out to you.
Okay. So I want to say thank you to everybody for your time today. You didn't have to be here, but you definitely have a commitment, and showing up today shows that. And it's a commitment to families who are entangled in a child welfare system that was never made to protect them. We are asking that you please take 2 minutes and type this URL into your browsers on your phone and just fill out a very short survey for us in terms of feedback, because we want to know that what we're doing is worth your time, and hopefully that it's going to be able to reach the community. So if everybody could just take a couple minutes to do that, that would be fantastic.